Let's turn our attention now to the Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking trial, where the jury is also in deliberations. Yesterday, the jury heard extensive closing arguments from both sides, with the state showing new video of a raid of Epstein's Florida mansion and arguing that Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's right hand and that Epstein could not have preyed upon the young girls without help from her. On the other hand, the defense argued that the state is trying Maxwell for being with Jeffrey Epstein, arguing that they brought charges against Maxwell since they can no longer prosecute Epstein. The defense went on to say that being with Epstein was, quote, the biggest mistake of her life, but that was no crime. After hearing the closing arguments, the jury deliberated for about 50 minutes before they retired for the day. They then returned this morning and resumed their deliberations at 9 a.m. Less than an hour later, they sent out a note to the judge asking to review testimony from 3 of the 4 accusers. Of course, we'll continue to track any developments from this trial and bring you the verdict as soon as it is announced. As we wait to hear from this jury, what I want to do now is take a look at some of the details in this case that the jury has heard and is likely weighing now as they continue their deliberations.
I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the many hundreds of people who have sent messages of support to us at this very, very sad time.
This is Ghislaine Maxwell addressing the press back in 1991 after her father, Robert Maxwell's death. Now, Maxwell doesn't seem to be receiving much support. The prosecution has made its case against the British socialite who has denied allegations from multiple women that she helped Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. The defense presented their case of a woman they believe is being wrongly targeted and used as a scapegoat just to hold someone accountable after Epstein's death.
Starting in 1994 until at least 1997, Maxwell had a personal and professional relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
The charges against Maxwell relies on the testimony of the 4 women the prosecution called to the stand to testify that Maxwell and Epstein groomed and sexually exploited them in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. 3 of the women testified under pseudonyms, and 1 decided to go public to tell her story.
Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old. Maxwell played a critical role in helping Epstein to identify, befriend, and groom minor victims for abuse. In some cases, Maxwell participated in the abuse herself.
2 of the women who testified stated they were 14 when the abuse began. Another woman testified she was only 17, and the 4th woman said she was 16 when she began to be sexually abused. Each woman testified to how Epstein would sexually abuse them and how Maxwell would sometimes join in or instruct the young girls on how Epstein liked to be massaged.
She pretended to be a woman they could trust. All the while, she was setting them up to be sexually abused by Epstein, and in some cases, by Maxwell herself.
The prosecution's case has called several witnesses, from former employees of Jeffrey Epstein who testified to seeing Epstein with some of the accusers and also discussed flight records and call logs, to a police officer who examined Epstein's massage table, and the accusers themselves, with the state saving Epstein accuser Annie Farmer as their final witness. She told the troubling story of how she met Epstein and how he and Maxwell sexually exploited her, claiming they would get her into college. She testified Maxwell asked her to get completely naked so she could give her a massage. She said, Maxwell pulled the sheet down and exposed my breasts and started rubbing on my chest and on my upper breasts. The judge advised the jurors ahead of her testimony that her contact with Maxwell and Epstein could not be viewed as illegal due to meeting New Mexico's age of consent in 1996. Under cross-examination, Farmer admitted Maxwell was not always involved in sexual acts with Epstein. If convicted of all 6 charges, she could spend the rest of her life in prison.
His office would continue the criminal investigation of anyone who may have conspired with Jeffrey Epstein to sex traffic young girls. And that is exactly what Ms. Maxwell is charged with today.
The defense rested their case, and Ghislaine Maxwell addressed the court. She said she would not testify in her own defense, stating, "The government has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt, so there is no reason for me to testify." Still with us, guest legal analyst James DeSimone. James, I don't think I've had a chance to ask you on this case, on this trial. What do you think about the presentation of evidence and the likelihood that Ghislaine Maxwell might be convicted?
It seems much stronger in this case because you have individuals, 4 individuals who testified in what sounds to be a very compelling manner, of conduct, sexual conduct towards them by Maxwell and Epstein while they were minors. And there's no dispute that they were in those places. There's no dispute that Maxwell, of course, is the longtime companion of Epstein, and the fact that she's bringing these underage women to Epstein's home and basically is the lady of the house while all these goings-on are occurring. Jury's asking for transcripts of the 3 of the individuals who testified. They probably want to make sure they're getting all the charges right. And I would predict that in this case, there's a much more stronger view towards a conviction that will result after the jury decides.
Do you think it was the right decision that Ghislaine Maxwell did not testify in her own behalf in this case?
Well, it would seem like her in this case, because there's such a wide variety of circumstances of abuse, that her testifying would just have opened her up to cross-examination on all the different incidents. And either she would have had to deny outright being there, so you have this conflict in the evidence that why is it going to be resolved in favor of her credibly, or she's going to have somehow explained, oh, I was there participating in sexual activities with someone I knew to be a minor, but I didn't think it was a crime. I mean, there just seems to be no good defense on her part. The defense is, hey, it's been a long time since this has happened. These women have other motives, and they didn't start going after Maxwell until Epstein was deceased. So there's a different motive for prosecution that doesn't relate to her innocence or guilt. Probably a good decision for her not to testify, no matter what the result here.
And there's really no way to know whether or not she would be charged without Epstein having now being deceased. I mean, we just don't know what they would or wouldn't have done. But certainly, I think that defense is the one that they felt like they had to mount to try to have one in order to present a defense of some type in this case. So again, once there's a verdict announced in that case, we'll bring it to you here on Court TV. As always, James DeSimone, thank you so much for joining us here on Court TV Live. Always a pleasure to have you. This is it for me, but stick around. Michael Ayala is up in the anchor chair next, and he will stay on Verdict Watch. Just a reminder, 11 hours, 38 minutes. He'll also have a closer look at the testimony surrounding Kim Potter's taser.